Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
2 certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only 2 best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go. All right, we are continuing on with the month of February. This is our Galentine's themed month.
So we are talking to one of our very best friends in the world, Stacy, about how to deal with a toxic workplace.
Not just deal, navigate it, whether or not to stay or go.
What to do, how to try to shift your experience.
How responsible you may be for your toxic workplace, which is going to trigger some of you. And you know, I kind of love that. So this is going to be real. I can't imagine that 99.9% of these people will find this relevant, right? I can't imagine a person who has not had a toxic workplace experience since the time they started working. Most people started working when we were teenagers.
I absolutely needed this conversation.
I've needed this so many times.
About 8 years ago.
Yeah.
When I had no idea what to do and I was just checked out and burnt out.
Yeah.
So hopefully this is the right timing for some of you, because it's a little late for me, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure you would have been ready to hear what she has to say.
Yeah, maybe not.
So, okay, let me more officially introduce you to Stacy. So, Stacy Campesi is a certified professional coach and workshop facilitator. She's passionate about helping unfulfilled, overachieving professionals find career confidence and clarity. Stacy loves working with smart, ambitious women who lead with heart and are so used to giving to others that they can't even recognize their own wants or needs without feeling selfish. By cutting through the uncertainty, self-doubt, and fear of disappointing others that holds them back, Stacy is able to help her clients make decisions that get them what they want without compromising a thing. Stacy is a professional certified coach with the International Coach Federation, and she's also certified as an MBTI and emotional intelligence practitioner.
She has all kinds of certifications.
She has. The reason we asked her to be a part of this is because she has had a lot of toxic workplace experiences as an employee. And then she's a certified coach who actually coached internally at a large organization. So she coached executives. She had...
And she does presentations and workshops for a lot of companies too.
So she's had a front row seat from every angle you can probably think of so many different workplaces. And she's helped shift the energy of a lot of workplaces and environments. So there was really nobody better. And also, she's just one of the best people. So
yeah, she really is
a no-brainer conversation. So enjoy this. And please come leave a comment at the end of this episode. The link will be in the episode description because we definitely want to hear about your experiences with toxic workplaces. And we want to know if what Stacy has shared is helping you think differently about this. So we'll see you at the end.
Let's hear it.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Stacy.
Okay, guys, when I say that this is one of our very best friends, I'm not lying.
No, this is someone that we
spend so much time with
and have a group text with that we are talking to her
almost constantly.
Almost every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And let's not forget that my kid calls you aunties. So there's that too.
True.
That's true. Oh my God.
I love her so much.
Oh my God. So and sometimes I don't think she can say it yet, but you refer to us as auntie, your auntie's Rachel, which I think is the funniest freaking thing.
And great punctuation.
Yeah, for those of you guys who are doubting the fact that really is an unfortunate nickname, it's real. There is a 1.5-year-old who refers to us that way. Oh my God.
It is solidified for the rest of your lifetime now.
I know.
You
I can't escape it.
We need one of those like couples gravestones.
Oh,
and it's
no,
like
your
lives
way far
Rachel. I just feel like we're going to outlive any men that we end up with. And so then it's just going to be us. Anyway, Stace, this is not about that. This is about toxic workplaces. Which is so funny because I feel like when I'm with Stacy, it's like the opposite of toxic. It's just like so fun and healing. But you have had lots of experiences. And when I got the idea to talk about this, it just very naturally felt like I should talk to you because you've been in a lot of different workplaces. You're a coach. You have coached inside organizations. So you've had a very interesting perspective that I think not a lot of people have on the inner workings of leadership. And so this is going to be a really fun conversation and about something that kind of sucks, which I think is good. Like it's not going to be heavy, but it does kind of suck to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like, it's Sunday night right now as we're recording, right? So I'm just thinking about all of the people that right now have the Sunday night blues and are praying for snow if you live on the East Coast so that you might not have to go to work tomorrow. I mean, it's it's
I
legit.
remember those days so vividly. As Sunday goes on, you just get more and more and more and more dread until you go to bed because Monday morning's coming. You got to go back to that toxic workplace.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would always pray that there would be 3 feet of snow so that it was guaranteed I wouldn't have to go in. But sometimes they'd be like, oh no, it's only 8 inches and I don't live in Boston. So it's I shouldn't be risking my life for this job, but they expect you to cut off your arm. And if you're not doing that, then apparently you're not good enough. So it's hard and it's really rough. So yes, I really want to get into this. So start wherever you want, but I'm pretty sure that you have a lot of great experiences you can touch on just from a personal place before we even get into the more okay, what do we do about this?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. So, it's so funny because when people ask me why I became a coach, I always start at the beginning, which is I always call it my career rock bottom, which came in the form of a promotion. And you guys probably remember this because I actually met the two of you when I was in this job.
Mm-hmm.
I think like most people kind of bought the lie that, oh, you go to college and you get your degree. And then 4 years later, there's this magical dream job waiting for you. And you're going to be so happy.
Right.
And it's going to use all of your skills. Well, newsflash, I had no idea what I wanted to do at the end of 4 years. And so I think like many others, I just naturally gravitated towards what was easy and what felt right. And while I really enjoyed my positions, not the organizations, but my positions, I just kept kind of climbing the ladder, just assuming that the next step would be better, right? And okay, this one wasn't what I wanted, but the next one will be better. And there was always a reason, whether it was the better title, more money, more autonomy, more responsibility. And so finally, I had kind of like worked my way up the ladder. And I remember the night I signed the contract and I said to my then boyfriend, now husband, like, I'm going to hate this job. Like, I don't think this is for me, but right. And then the rationalizations kicked in, but it's more money. It's a shorter commute. It's, all of the things that I should have wanted. And I was in the job for like 3 weeks and I came home and I was like, I can't do this. And you guys, I was like, talk about pity party. Like I was like in despair because it just threw me through a loop. If this wasn't what I wanted, then what did I want?
Yeah,
I didn't even know, and I didn't know where to start. And so to answer your question, I mean, that's how I kind of got into this work because I had to dig myself out of that hole. And then not only dig myself out, but explain to other people why I felt so disconnected from the work that I was doing.
Yeah.
Because on paper I was so successful.
Right. Ooh, and that is one of the things you tell people. It's kind of like, it's not, I mean, I don't know if it's your elevator pitch or it's your tagline or it's just something you say a lot about helping people create a career that looks as like it feels as good as it looks on paper.
Yes, exactly.
Which is so true. And I think so many people can resonate with that sentiment. Like in so many ways, not just your career. I think about that in a relationship sense too. Like, oh my gosh, I have this wonderful marriage. And from the outside, everyone thinks it's perfect. But from the inside, I'm not really that satisfied. And I can't point out why. And it's really freaking me out,
Absolutely.
And you're so right. At the inability to articulate why you're unhappy is so scary.
Yeah. And I felt like I was broken. I felt like, what's wrong with me? Like something's got to be wrong. Like, why isn't this making me happy?
Yeah. Well, and you said that you really actually liked some of the jobs, but not the organization. So I'm curious, looking back now with the hindsight that you have, what was the disconnect between you and the working places where it clearly was not a match?
Yeah, I love this question because there's like kind of two perspectives that you're going to get, right? So first, it's like me as an employee, and now it's me knowing all that I know, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
at the time, I mean, it just felt like I didn't understand because I was working in my background's in higher education. So organizations, colleges, universities that like said they wanted to help students, right? And it should have been a place where something besides money mattered, but that was never the case. And there was a really big disconnect between what they said they valued and what I was experiencing as an employee. And, when you work for a not-for-profit or a mission-driven organizations, oftentimes while they have the best intentions, it's kind of managed from this place of lack, right? Like, who are we to spend this money on training and development? Who are we to spend this money on our people and pay them, enough so they don't have to share a studio with 5 other people? Like, we should be spending that money on the people we serve. And like, I get it, right? Like in theory, and the dynamic and the culture that it creates it's tough because, it just everyone kind of then entrains to that scarcity mindset.
Yeah, that is such a good point that you can be in an organization that claims to have one set of values, but then operates from a different set of values, which makes you feel really trapped because you're like, I came into this thinking that this is what we were all about, but the way you treat your people doesn't necessarily always align with what you say.
I feel like there's like very sinister, almost gaslighting, and it can be an unconscious gaslighting that goes on where if you bring that up, they're like, no, of course we value that. It's right here in our mission. Like they think they value it.
Right.
So it's not even a conscious sort of departure from integrity. It's just like, it's a complete unconscious, almost dissonance that's going on. And so then if you try to bring it up or if you try to do something about it, you're the crazy one, or at least that's how I'm interpreting the possibility.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes, right? Because it's like, and I love what you're saying, Rachel, about it is unconscious because when you think about it, and now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was kind of selfish because here I was judging all the people that I worked for. And I have a funny story that Rachel heard a few days ago about this, like judging them as, being like, I don't even know, like just like the worst people on this earth. And now knowing what I know as a coach, I'm like, oh no, they were just stressed, right? And like when we make decisions from stress, we often make decisions that aren't really in other people's best interest, but we think that they are. We can justify it as, yeah, this is totally for my people. And yeah, I totally do value them. And to your point, Rachel, part of them, of course, does. I mean, I think whenever you're in a leadership role, for the most part, there is a part of you that, wants to help people. But when you're coming from this unconscious place, it's really hard to make those connections.
So do you want to tell that story?
I want to hear the story now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I will never forget it. Oh my gosh, Kristen. And I'm talking to Kristen since Rachel
since I haven't heard it.
So I was in that job that I hated, right? And I'm sitting in the COO's office with my boss. And I don't even remember like what the conversation was, but I remember it was bad. Like, I honestly think we thought we were going to get fired. Like, we were like prepped. My boss brought her purse thinking like, oh, this is it.
Oh,
like, wow. This is it. Like, after this, we're being escorted out kind of thing. And it wasn't that bad. Like, whatever he was talking about, we were not fired. But I just remember sitting there looking at his bookshelf and he had all of the right books, right? Like, Start with Why and From Good to Great and like all of the books that like great leaders are supposed to read.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking, I don't understand. Like I have my master's in leadership. Like not only do I buy into these principles, I've taught these theories. I've taught these principles. But if all it took was to read a book, then why would I be in this position in the first place? Like what's the disconnect between what we traditionally think about as a good leader and then what I've been experiencing my entire career?
Yes, the difference between the theory and the execution. Your boss might have, first of all, I wonder if those books, if you'd even read those books, they might have just been really good leadership books to put on your shelf.
Yeah, well, they could have been gifts from people who were trying to give him a really unsubtle hint.
But even if he had read them, knowing the theory about something and then actually putting it into practice, they are not the same thing.
No.
And a lot of companies might really believe that they're doing the right thing, but the execution is not following through. And so you feel the disconnect, and that can feel toxic to you.
I heard such a funny, it's not funny, it's actually kind of depressing, but in a darkly humorous kind of way. It's some sort of statistic that something like 75, don't quote me on this, but 70 or 75% of people who read self-help books feel worse afterwards.
No.
But I think that's why, is because you can read it and you can intellectually understand what's going on, but you might not have the power or the ability or the wherewithal or the resources to implement and to actually integrate on a deep belief kind of level the principles that you're absorbing or trying to absorb in the books. And so I feel like that's such a good example. And that happens in so many workplaces too, where people have good intentions or they've read the right material, but they're not implementing it. And the workplace is still like really miserable place to be. And like, what do you do when you're in that situation? So what did you do, Stacy? Like after having that realization?
Yeah. So I just I hit my rock bottom. I threw myself a pity party. And then like 3 days later, once I realized that coaching and consulting weren't the same thing, I enrolled in IPAC. Like it was like the fastest decision I've made in my entire life.
Yeah. So you guys don't have to become a coach in order to get out of a toxic workplace. That's just one way out.
I mean, we're a little biased. We might suggest that route, but certainly not.
It's not for everybody.
I mean, but when you really break it down, right? I mean, what did coach training do for me? And I think the two of you would agree too, right? I mean, it really is a program in self-awareness.
Yes.
It's all about understanding your emotions and understanding your wants and your desires and kind of getting a framework and a roadmap to, express your emotions in a really positive, constructive way. And I think for me, the biggest thing was, okay, I can make decisions from a place of fear and that might get me short-term gains, but it's never going to get me long-term results.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the coaching process really was about for me, was switching into this place of possibility, of inspiration, of hope, and of confidence and conviction, which is a big part of this. So, I mean, when you say like, what did I do? Well, it was quite simple. I started believing in myself.
Yeah. You took initiative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. You took responsibility for your own BS, which we're going to get into later when we talk about what to actually what to change and how we can go about improving, or maybe we need to get out. We'll answer that too.
Right.
Of a toxic workplace.
Well, I'm first curious. I know that I have been in toxic workplaces, so I know what it feels like to me, but I'm curious, Stacy, how you would define what that even means.
Oh my God, I was literally going to ask that and it wasn't on our notes, but I was also thinking, I want to ask Stacy, how do you define a toxic workplace?
And how do you know if you're in one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's such a good question. So there is another coach, and I think, what's her name? Brooke
Castillo. I think she has a podcast called Life Coach School. So she must be like a coach for coaches.
Yes. Thank you, Rachel, for pronouncing that for me. So I was like randomly going through my podcast one day, and I literally only have like one episode on my phone. Right. And like, that's of course the one that just decided to play, because when I hook my phone up to like my Bluetooth, it just takes over. And it was really interesting because, what she said, and this really resonated with me, is that, like workplaces aren't toxic. People aren't toxic. Like toxic literally means poison, which means that if someone was poisonous, I would like Rachel, if you were poisonous or toxic, I would touch you and I would then be poisoned. Right. Like that's not actually possible. So it's not necessarily that our workplaces are toxic or our bosses are toxic. It's that we are unhealthy in the situation or in the relationship. That's the toxicity, is that we're not showing up the way that we want to be. And most of the time we're in a place where we feel powerless, choiceless. Like we just have to kind of put our head down and go with the flow, and not in a good way. We can't speak up. We can't have ideas. We can't have beliefs. So, I mean, in that regard, it makes sense that we kind of feel like prisoners with just shackles on most of the time in our workplaces. But really, it's only toxic if we allow it to be toxic. And we stay.
Ooh, the toxicity is coming from inside the house, y'all.
Shocker, right?
Yeah. Okay, but this is going to piss people off, Stacy. You saying this is going to piss people, and I love it.
Well, I'm even thinking this would have pissed me off 7-8 years ago.
I would have been like, no, you don't understand. My boss is a straight up bitch,
Right. Or my work environment is completely draining. Everyone who walks in there feels drained. It's not me. It's totally them. And
what's your response to that?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, like, yeah, I was that same person. I mean, I think if you would have told me this 6 years ago, I probably would have punched you. No, not really. I wasn't that aggressive. I probably just would have walked away crying. But so my response to that is, like, now when I say this, like, are there, of course, like really egregious things that happen, like sexual assault and that type of thing? Like, yes. And I think it's important to just to note, like,
we're not victim blaming here.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Like, there are things that happen that really people are victims to. And for most of us in the workplace, like, your boss maybe is a bitch. Like, your boss maybe is an arrogant asshole. Like, no one's saying that's not true. And you're staying there. You're keeping yourself in the relationship, right? In the way that it's currently functioning.
Yeah, you might not be speaking up or something.
Exactly. So when I for my own life, I look back and it's like, I stayed small. I stayed, kind of quiet and powerless because of all the stupidest shit. Like, oh, they're going to fire me. Like, I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like something, I would have just something so crazy to get fired.
Oh my God.
Like, it wasn't even in the realm of possibility.
What did you say when we were talking about this the other day? You said something that made me laugh so hard, but it was something like, I mean, literally, you would have to set the place on fire, or you would have to shoot someone in the middle of the office in order to get fired these days. Like, it's not actually easy to get fired.
No, it's actually very hard. And it's because HR, like, they need a lot of paperwork to fire you.
Right. It's
so,
kind
like,
of a hassle.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, exactly. So, going back to, like, what would I say to someone who's, like, really triggered by this? Like, I'm actually glad you're triggered, because it means that maybe now you're ready to make some changes and to really ask, yourself, are you happy? Are you happy the way that you're showing up at work?
I mean, I'm thinking, I'm putting myself back into my old experience at that completely draining job. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm not doing anything. I'm just letting so much slide by. I'm showing up and
so
barely participating.
Yeah.
So yeah, at first I was like, what do you mean? No, it's totally them.
know.
Oh no, it's definitely partially me. I'm not helping the situation at all. That's for sure.
Well, and I was telling Stacy when we were kind of having our pre-conversation about this, that the boss I had that was such a bee, when I had my exit interview and the CEO asked me about her, I just gave her, I was like, she's fine. I said nothing because I was like, who cares? I'm on my way out. It's her word against mine. I was her only employee. So it and the way she behaved to me was not the way she behaved to the people in charge of her. And so in my mind, I was 23. It was pointless. I felt like you didn't have any power. And I felt like they didn't see what I was seeing. And so, yeah, I didn't speak up. And yet I'm complaining about how toxic it was.
Yeah, totally.
Probably the three people who were in your role before you also didn't speak up for the same reason.
And that's a really good point too, right? Because we feel like, oh my gosh, if we say something, they're going to think we're crazy. Well, you know what? Maybe they will, right? But at least like, all right, I've kind of aired it out. Like I've alerted the powers that be, and then maybe by the third or fourth person, okay, something can actually change. And I think that's part of it too, is that, I mean, I used to have fantasies, I'm not kidding you guys, about my boss getting fired, like legitimate. And like my first job, oh my gosh, we were all there was a few of us in grad school together, and we were like planning a coup of like how we could all leave together, like on the same day. How much time do I have in my hands? Like, this could be our daydream. But all that to say that I think that there is something, we want like immediate gratification, and we want something to change right now. And then if we say something, it doesn't happen, we just assumed it was all for naught. But we don't know the ripple effect that we actually created.
Right.
That's true.
And by not saying anything, you are choosing to continue to feel like a victim to the situation. If you say something, then if something changes, great. If nothing changes, then you get to decide, what am I going to do about that? So I'm curious, because I feel like there is a little bit of victim energy that we're describing here, being in a toxic workplace. So I know, Stacy, that you have done a lot of reading and you know a lot about what's called the victim triangle. And I think that might be showing up here. So I'm curious if you can
We've never
share
talked
that.
about this
We
on
have
the
not.
podcast.
First, just share what it is, and then the relationship of that to a toxic workplace.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So it's such a cool tool. And just so you guys know, listening, like, we talk about this all of the time in our personal conversations.
Yeah.
Like, where in the
do.
triangle are we?
Yep. Oh, here I am again.
Exactly. Here I am. Just a moment. So essentially, it's called the victim triangle or the drama triangle. And it essentially says that, you know, in any situation, you can be one, and then sometimes all three different roles. So you could be the victim, the rescuer, or is it the challenger?
The perpetrator?
The perpetrator?
I don't know. I think of it as the perp, but
yeah, that actually feels more right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. When we flip it on its head, then it becomes the challenger. Yes.
Okay.
So what I love about this, right, is like if I feel like I'm a victim, that automatically means that I'm looking to blame someone, right?
Yeah. Looking for a perp.
Looking for the perp, which also means that I'm also looking for a rescuer, the person who's going to come save me.
Which means it's not you because you're looking outside yourself. I'm already the victim. Somebody else has to be the rescuer is what it feels like when you're in that situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then when you look at it though, right? And so I'd imagine for a lot of the folks that are listening to this, if you like Rachel and Kristen, it means that you have, you know, a really good heart. And if I say people pleaser, that might identify with you just a little bit.
I think a lot.
Pretty sure that was our most popular
It's our all-time most downloaded episode still.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay. I know you told me that, but I forgot. But that's even cooler. And here's why, right? So it's like I can simultaneously feel like the victim and my boss or, you know, my boss's boss or whoever is the perpetrator. And at the same time, I might also feel like the rescuer. Like it's my job to take care of my employees, my coworker who's really shy, whoever, right? So I'm not only simultaneously feeling the victim, I may be also trying to take on the role as rescuer for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Which is added pressure.
If you guys are having a hard time, like, which you won't, but navigate or like seeing this in a work context, think about your family. And I'm guaranteeing you'll all figure out who's playing what role inside your own family.
Yep.
Yes.
Because every family has that dynamic, right?
Somewhere in the family, yes.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And like you've probably played every role at some point in your life too. If you're in like a drama triangle with somebody or somebody's. I'm just curious if you have like a good example that comes to mind of a scenario that either you experienced or maybe you've seen or a client has experienced that is like a really good illustration of the victim triangle. Because I really want people to understand this one. I think it's really important that they be able to see themselves in it.
Yeah. So actually two come to mind.
Let's go for it.
Let me think about which one
pause.
first.
Take as much time as you need.
I'm an extrovert. We don't pause, Rachel.
I know. We just give it both examples.
Exactly. We just keep going. So I'm thinking about a client who it kind of flipped the triangle on its head in a really good way. And so I'll talk to that in a second. But the way it kind of started is she is working for an organization. And the SVP she just felt like no matter what she did, like nothing was right. She's in marketing. So no matter what content they created, it was wrong. No matter what direction they wanted to go, it wasn't that he wanted to go. She just felt like no matter what she did, he would say no just because. And it got really bad where she was taking it so personally and just feeling like, well, it must be me. Like, what did I do? You know, did I piss him off in the elevator? Like I don't know what I did to kind of deserve this treatment. And she started looking for jobs, actually, because it got to the point where she was like, I can't do this anymore. Like the anxiety of going to work every day is, you know, way more than any possible gains that I could be getting. And something actually really interesting happened in that moment when she was just like, screw it, like I'm out. She started using her voice and she started asking questions, and not in a defensive or snarky way, but more just from a place of curiosity. Because at that point she just felt like I have nothing to lose.
Right. Like, so who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, okay, so I'm really curious because last month, you know, in the staff meeting, you said this, we did this, and now you're saying this. So like, which is it? And do you know what happened? She is now like the second in command. She not only gained his respect, but the respect of the entire executive team.
Oh my God.
So much so that they had a new grant come in and they wanted her to lead the project. And she said, nope, I don't think so. That's not for me. And they said, okay, no problem. And gave her like another really cool job. So like she's calling her own shots. She's doing her own thing. And she's being like truly who she is. And she's not afraid to ask those questions anymore. So that was kind of the first thing that came to mind.
That's amazing. Again, she started out as the victim. And then instead of waiting for a rescuer, she just decided to like, you know what? I'm going to take initiative. I'm going to do something uncomfortable and I'm just going to speak up. And you just realize how much you've been blocking yourself by trying to be perfect or not rock the boat.
Exactly. And I think to your point, right? So when we think about it, like, and when you flip the triangle kind of over, the victim becomes the victor, right? And that's exactly how you do it, by realizing like, I have a choice. Right now, I feel like I'm choiceless. And I feel like everything that happens, I'm just at the effect of. It's almost like, I think of like seaweed just kind of rocking back and forth in the waves, like it really has no control over where it goes. And that's like true victimhood. Just like, I have no control over this. But when you start to realize like, I do, right? I do have choices.
Even small ones.
Even small ones. And even ones that I previously thought were off limits to me. That's when things start changing and we do become the victor.
Wow. I love that we're talking about this, because I think what people, probably not a lot of people who listen to this, but it's okay if you feel called out by what I'm about to say. I feel like people come into, like, they see a title like, oh, how to navigate a toxic workplace. Great. I need to know like what
how
to do
deal
about
with my toxic people.
How to deal with this. And then of course we're telling you, oh no, it's more of an inner job than an out. Like, nothing's going to come in and swoop in and be the rescuer and solve all of this for you. It's not about waiting for someone else to fix it. It's about, you have to feel empowered in and of yourself to do what you can. And that may not change anything. And in which case, then maybe it's time to go. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But no, we're not actually waiting for anybody to rescue us. And that can kind of be an uncomfortable truth for people to swallow.
Yes.
So, okay, this leads me to sort of what this brings to mind, and what you and I kind of talked about before we started recording, was that a lot of what keeps a toxic workplace toxic is the kind of silent majority. There's like a kind of a complicity among people who aren't speaking up. Like, everyone is too afraid to say something or to do something different or to rock the boat. And everyone's kind of too attached to being the good girl or the good guy and not speaking up and being quiet and being pleasing and being complacent, that it's allowing things to sort of, like, there's like a groupthink going on that's kind of allowing things to spiral.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just want to hear you talk more about that.
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts about this.
As a recovering good girl yourself?
Oh yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I love that term, right? Because I feel like, especially in our society, like, we're just conditioned to like, just do as you're told, like, what's the expression? Like, children are seen and not heard, and it's like, we're supposed to just like, be respectful and be professional and like, just do what our boss tells us without any questions asked. And I find it hysterical now, because now in my role as a coach, and now that I've had the chance to coach executives, I will tell you their biggest frustration is that people don't take initiative. People don't have curiosity. Like, people don't have any creativity. And so it's really funny how like we think that's what's going to make us successful. And it actually is what's hindering us, because what our bosses actually want are people who can make their lives easier. Like, they're busy. They got a lot on their plate, and like, trying to understand what you think and what your opinions are and how you think, we should handle a project. Like, they really want that. They're actually craving that.
Yeah. And I think a big part of what creates this whole good guy, good girl syndrome is assuming, well, this is just how things are here. There's this belief that, well, this system is built this way and I have to color within the lines, because that's what being a good girl or good guy means, is following the rules and coloring inside the lines. What you're actually saying is a lot of leadership, at least quality management, quality leaders who really want the best for their people, they want you to ask questions and come up with ideas and be innovative and think outside of the lines sometimes for the good of everyone, because they don't always have time or energy to do that. So by being the good girl, you're not helping yourself or anyone else in the company. Exactly. In fact, you might be propagating a quote unquote toxic experience, right? Because nobody's willing to speak up.
Exactly. And so, what I told Rachel, I used to have this colleague who irked me to no end. And she used to say, what was her expression? If you're at the top and you're not lonely, you're doing it wrong. And I that just like every fiber of my being wants to revolt against that. Right. Because I think what happens is when we're used to being the good girl and we're, keeping our ideas or our opinions or our experiences kind of quiet, we give our bosses this false sense of reality, right? Like, it's we're just like, this complacency just tells them like, oh no, everything's fine. Like, I'm fine. Everything's good. Or if we're agreeing with their idea because we think that's what they want to hear, even if we think it's going to be a complete disaster, or we sugarcoat a message, right? And we're not direct, or we're wishy-washy. Like most of the time, leaders don't actually have any idea of what's happening because no one's telling them the truth.
Right.
And I'll tell you, when you're that person who's willing to be compassionate yet direct with them, oh my gosh, it makes the world of difference for everyone. And I added that compassionate part because I think the only model we have for this is like, I can stay quiet or I can get really angry and blow up. Right.
Right.
And
or I can be like a brat or something like that.
Exactly.
Or complainer.
Yes. And that's not going to work. Right. Like that's not going to be the style of communication that's going to make change. Like the true change comes about. And I know we're going to talk about this more in a few minutes. Like when you cannot take it personally. Right. And like, so I realized that this workplace, it's not about me and my boss isn't doing this to me. And I have feedback to share. And when you can come from that place, that's when like real change actually happens.
So let's get into, we kind of outlined a little bit before we jumped into this, what you've seen work. And you kind of broke it down into 4 steps about navigating and even trying to improve a toxic workplace. We will answer the question later of when do you just need to go? Because we're not saying that you can improve every single work situation.
Or that it's up to you to improve every work situation.
Right. But I think it's really important, especially if you believe there's potential for you to be happy at this job, or there's something that you want to get out of it. Like maybe there's an experience you really want to have that only this job can provide you, and you don't want to necessarily let the toxic environment dictate how you feel and how much you're enjoying your work. So I feel like it's worth trying to make it better. Because if anything, if nothing else, you can kind of leave saying, okay, I gave it my all and I left everything on the field, sort of, and I feel good about that. And maybe you really developed as a person and having to do hard things, having to speak up. Like, that's all good for you. So anyway, what do you think the first step is in trying to kind of, I guess, improve a toxic workplace or just, navigate it?
Yeah. So as you were talking, I was like, okay, I know we have these 4 steps like outlined, but I want to add in one more.
Oh, great. Make it 5.
Right? So, I think, first and foremost is like when people ask your opinion, give it to them. And so 2 very clear examples stick out to me. My best friend was asked to do a 360 for her boss. And a 360 is essentially when you get feedback from all levels, right? So the people above you, your peers, and any direct reports that you might have, in addition to like clients or vendors or those types of folks.
And it's meant to be anonymous, right?
Yes, it's meant to be anonymous most of the time. I mean, it should be. If you're being asked to do a 360 and it's not, then maybe let's talk about that first. But it should be anonymous. But here's the thing, like, even if it's not, so what, right? Like, in most organizations, in a good organization, a 360 should be voluntary. No one should be forced to do a 360. And so I would say, if you're asked to, participate, ask the person that you're rating, like, do you actually want my feedback? Or like, is someone forcing you to do this, right? And the reason that's so important is because if they are choosing to do this, they really want feedback. They really want to know how they're doing. So long story short, she calls me and she's like, I don't know what to do. Like, my boss wants my feedback. Like, I'm going to have to lie. I was like, what? Like, what? Why would you do that? I can't give my boss feedback. I was like, why not? Like, and my mind was blown at just how like sure she was that it was not her place to tell her boss what to do differently.
Well, that good girl syndrome was really getting
strong
her
in
hard.
that one.
Totally. So, whether it's a 360 or most companies will do some sort of like employee engagement survey, right? Where it's like once a year, they want to know how they're doing. And more companies are taking this stuff really seriously. And if you work in a corporation, I'm sure that's not a new term. Like, how serious HR takes it. That is your chance for your voice to be heard.
You made a really good point earlier too about you don't have to do it in a cruel or combative or offensive way. You can just say, here are some things that I think would really help me to be more motivated or help me to be more engaged, or that would just ease my workload a bit. You can say it in a
polite, but honest way.
Exactly.
Yes. And another little tip for that is, and this is actually really helpful in kind of breaking down silos, is when you're giving feedback, like think of whatever the thing is, the thing that you want changed, like where is it coming from that's actually from a place of good intentions. So for instance, like maybe your boss is constantly adding more work onto your plate, right? And you feel like at 8 a.m. in the morning, you know exactly what your priorities are. And by 3 p.m., like everything has changed. And so maybe the way you say that is, I really appreciate that you have big ideas and that like you're not one for the status quo and you don't ever want to limit us to just doing what we've always done. And that's awesome. And sometimes it makes it really hard for me to prioritize, right? So it's like you want to like acknowledge them for the intention that they're actually trying to bring into the world, because it's typically not pure evil and they're not trying to make your life hell.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Okay. All right. So that was like point 1. So now we've got 4 more points, right?
4 more. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll speed this up. So
You
the
don't have
second
to speed it up.
Okay, good. That was really, I didn't want to. So thank you for giving me permission.
Whatever.
The next one is, oh my gosh, get a grip on your gremlin. Like
Yes.
the inner critic chatter in a workplace. Oh, so,
Yep.
and you guys have talked about gremlins before on the podcast. Yes.
Yeah, they know what an inner critic is at this point.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
Awesome. So, I mean, when you really kind of take a step back, and I know when I look at my own career, like I was miserable because every day I felt like I had to go to work and prove my worth. Every day.
Yep. And if you don't feel worthy, then you're going to interpret all kinds of feedback from other people as more evidence of your unworthiness. And you're going to feel like everything is toxic when it might be a total misinterpretation because of your gremlin.
I think a toxic work environment just might be everyone's gremlins talking to everyone else's gremlins.
No one's really
Pretty much.
there. It's just a bunch of gremlins.
It's just a bunch of gremlins running the show.
Yep.
And that's why it's a shit show.
Yes. Actually, that's the best definition ever. We should get that in like Urban Dictionary.
Okay.
Berkeley. Yeah, totally. So it's like, once you have a grip on your gremlin and you understand what your inner critic messages are, and not just what your messages are, but the actions, right? Like what you're actually doing because of your inner critic's message, it makes it much easier to show up differently. And then the cool thing is not only can you start to understand your inner critic, but you start to spot other people's. And now all of a sudden it's like, it just brings you this place of like, oh my gosh, like, wow, Rachel's gremlin's coming out right now.
Yeah.
Like, let me get the popcorn and see how this unfolds. Like, it's not about us anymore.
Right.
Really.
Instead of thinking that your boss just does these crazy 180s and blows up out of nowhere and you have no idea where you're like, oh, their gremlin just came out. Oh, okay, I see. They were normal. Something happened. Their inner critic just exploded out of them. That's where this came from. Oh, we can move on. Now, I'm not saying that means you just accept that behavior blindly, but at least you can understand where it's coming from and maybe have a little bit more empathy because you also have a gremlin.
So this just brings to mind, I have a client who, she knows who she is if she's listening to this. She has a really difficult work environment. I would call it toxic. And she has been accustomed to working like 11, 12-hour days, 6 days a week, which is insane.
That
and
is
I would have
crazy.
already jumped off a bridge long before. Like, I don't know how she's done it. But after about 2 months of coaching, she's getting on the phone and she's like, it's not perfect, but like, it doesn't bother me nearly as much as it was bothering me a couple months ago. And she said, it's because like, I feel more confident in myself and I'm more like, oh, well, I'm fine. Like you said, I don't feel like I have to prove my worth here anymore. And so because of that, I'm not feeling so stressed and so anxious and I'm not interpreting everything in like the worst light. And so, yes, really getting a hold on your inner critic and realizing that a lot of the things you're interpreting are through the lens of I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, everyone's going to find out that I suck, that often what's really going on and what you're interpreting are two very different things. Perfect. I love this point. I could talk about this point all day, but okay, let's do the next point.
Well, it actually leads right into the next point, right? Which is like, stop taking shit personally. I mean, like when we think about our days, right? And even now, I mean, you guys know it. I had like the worst day on Monday. Like I was just in the worst mood ever.
Aww.
And so I, of course, text Rachel and Kristen and our other friend, Joanna. And
Who's also been on the podcast.
Emotional Constipation with Joanna Platt from April of 2018. Check it out.
So, and when I sat down and I really like thought about what was irking me so bad is like, I was taking stuff personally. I was comparing myself to others and judging myself as like less than, right? And, it really impacted my mood so much. And it actually took me off guard because I haven't been in that shitty of a mood in so long. I was like, whoa, like what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so thankful that I had that realization because when we are, or when we're making things mean something about us, when they truly don't, we can't show up and have a clear, objective opinion in any situation, in any relationship, but especially at work. And so a tool that I really love to use, and corporate clients really love this because it's a nice visual. So if you just Google ladder of inference, you'll see it, but it's essentially just picture a ladder and every rung on the ladder is a step. So let me walk you through this. So let's say, so the first step is something happens, right? Like a situation happens. So Rachel and I both sit down at the diner. We get our menus, we order our drinks. Step number 2 is that because I'm a person and I'm seeing my life through my lens, which is my experiences, my education, my values, my beliefs, all of that, I'm automatically going to filter out some details because they're not relevant to my lens, right? To my perspective. And so the example I was using with Rachel is like, oh, I noticed that she ordered a glass of water when I ordered a mimosa, right? So the next step is now I make meaning of that. Rachel ordered water, not a mimosa. And by the way, you guys know Rachel doesn't drink, but I'm just using it as an example.
She's making this shit up, but it's great. I love it.
I totally am. Like, oh my God, I wonder if Rachel's pregnant. Right. So now I'm on like the 5th rung and I'm like, oh my God, Rachel's pregnant. So now I'm taking action on that. I'm leaving the diner. I'm calling Kristen. I'm calling Joanna. Like, do you guys think? Right. And like,
why hasn't she told me? Does she not trust me with this like really tender information?
Exactly. We just spent a whole breakfast together and she didn't tell me. Did you guys know? So it's like such an absurd like example, but I kind of think it's hysterical and it's so relevant to what we do every day. We climb up the ladder. Something happens and all of a sudden before we know, we've made it mean something about us and we're taking action on it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, just stop. Like, where are you on the ladder? And climb back down.
Oh, I love this so much. I'm thinking of a client example version of this where she was convinced that people could not work from home. She said there's one guy in her office who sometimes works from home and he lives an hour and a half away from the office. And so she was like, well, if I don't live an hour and a half away from the office, I can't work from home. That's what I saw. And I made this assumption that is how things work here.
Right. He only got an exception because of his circumstance. And I asked her, can you actually go back and look up, is that a policy in your company? Like, I want to know, is there an actual policy that you can't work from home unless you have like a certain, distance or special circumstance? In which case, wouldn't everyone just move?
And she was like, there is nothing. I don't remember them saying that at all in my interview. And eventually she asked, is this even a possibility for other people? And they were like, yeah.
But no one
asked. So she's assuming you can only do it when you live that far away. And actually it was just because he asked.
Yep.
It's often that simple.
Yes. But she was making that an absolute truth. Like, this is how things work at my company.
Yeah. Well, and I've had a client who really just this week, she will probably listen to this and she'll probably LOL, who was terrified to ask if she could work from home a couple days a week and finally got the courage to do it after weeks, months of building herself up about it. And her boss was like, yeah, sure. And she just like, almost like, and then she said, literally, my inner critic was beating me up later saying, why didn't you ask earlier? I'm like, are you serious? Your inner critic will find a way to make everything wrong.
So true.
Yes, your successes and our celebrations are wrong. And
2 minutes before you asked, it was beating you up for not asking. And then 2 minutes later, it was beating you up for not doing it sooner. I mean, for God's sake, you can't win. But that just proves that often what's between you and getting over maybe the thing you find most toxic about your situation, which for her was having to go to work every single day and not getting any like introvert time, was just her inability to get over her own fear and just ask.
Isn't that the next step?
Is that the next step?
It is the next step. It is.
Oh, damn.
So, I have a client. I know, right? I hope she's listening because this is her famous tagline. And she's got a very cool job. She recruits physicians. And when she's recruiting women physicians, a big point is always salary. Like women, and we know this, right? Women just do not ask for money like men will. Mm-hmm. And so this actually really ties into a lot of inference, right? Like, oh no, like market value is, or oh no, like
I couldn't possibly.
This kind of environment, right? They'll never pay me more. So long story short, her tagline, she says all the time is, and I love it so much, the answer to every unasked question is always no.
Yes. Boom.
Yes.
Right? It's always no. So, so the next point is like, ask for what you want. Now, with that being said, it has to actually be attainable.
Yes.
So there's 2 things here that I see happen. And I'm sure you guys see this all the time too with clients. we really know what we don't want, and we are so good at articulating what we don't want. But framing it in terms of what we do want is sometimes really hard. Like just listen to conversations, right? Like even when you're talking to your friends about where to go to dinner, you'll notice it's like, well, I don't like Mexican because I had that on Tuesday. And I don't want to go to, this place because they just got a bad Yelp review. Yeah. So we won't actually answer the question of what do we actually want to eat? Mm-hmm. What do we actually want with our career or from our boss or from our coworker? Mm-hmm. And so start to notice how often you're going down that what I don't want track and flip it around to what you do want.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because saying what you don't want doesn't actually help you get closer to what you do want. That's just complaining. Yeah. For no good reason. But if you can say, I don't want this, so I think what I would actually want is maybe this, well, now we have something we can ask for.
Right. And one of the great points you were making when we were brainstorming about this was that it has to be attainable. It can't be something, and you don't have to use that same example, but I would love for you to use an example to illustrate what you meant by like, you can't just ask for something that's pie in the sky. You actually have to ask for something that's relevant to you.
Yeah, for sure. So I won't use that example, but I think I have an even better example of something I hear all of the time from clients, right? And so for a lot of clients, it's oftentimes not their entire workplace is miserable, although sometimes it is. Oftentimes it's like one or two people and like they're ready to leave because of that annoying coworker or like that really mean boss or whatever it is. And so it's not uncommon for people to, go into their either their bosses or their boss's boss office and say things like, I want John fired. It's either him or me, like I'm not gonna be happy until you fire that person, or I want a $25,000 raise, or I want you to pay for my master's degree, even though my workplace doesn't have any sort of tuition reimbursement program. Yeah. Like those are things that like you have no control over. Right. And like, they're so big that it's not an easy yes. Like make it an easy yes for your boss.
Or something like an institutional change. I think the whole company should now operate in this way. I want you guys to change this policy for everyone versus this is what I particularly would benefit from.
Or like, I would like to add this agenda item to our meeting on Friday. Like really, really tangible and like break it down into the baby steps.
Exactly.
Okay. So what's our last major point in our 5-point bullet list?
So, all right. So essentially what I'd like to just share, and anybody who has talked to Rachel and Kristen one-on-one knows this, like we kind of get the development formula totally wrong, whether that's professional or personal development, because we think that if we just do something differently, something will change, right? Like life will magically be so much better. And then we make all these changes and for some reason it isn't. Or if it is, it's for a really short period of time.
Right.
And the reason for that is because we get it all wrong. Like the action is the last part in the formula.
Yeah.
Our thoughts create our feelings, right? Our beliefs create our feelings, which then create our actions. And so don't spend all your time thinking about what am I going to do? The question that you should really be asking yourself is who do I want to be? Yeah. What skills, what qualities, what characteristics, what gifts of mine do I want to share? When you focus on that, everything else becomes kind of easy. Because the action isn't so, like we don't have to think about it so much anymore. It just happens.
Yeah, this people get it so backward, so twisted. They just think, okay, if I just get a new job, then everything will be better. Or if I can get a promotion, then I'll be able to leave this situation behind. And it's like you take yourself everywhere you go. And so the first step to changing any situation in your life is to first look inward and to take stock of, okay, how am I showing up? And like we've already talked about, could I be maybe the victim in this situation when I don't really need to be? Or am I being too much of a good girl? And is there something I really want that I just haven't had the courage to ask for? And so instead of going and, quitting or bitching about my boss behind their back, I have to sort of take stock of how I'm showing up and who I'm choosing to be. And then from there, actions can change dramatically. Okay. This is such a good point.
So I like those 5 steps. I feel like each one could probably be its own podcast topic, but but it's a good framework for people to start figuring out how might I be able to take back some control in this situation.
Yeah.
And not feel like a victim to my toxic work environment. So I have a few questions that I think people might be wondering as we're talking about this whole concept of toxic work environments that I would love your take on, Stacy. So I want to first ask you, for the people who either might be looking for a job right now or who know that they need to just leave where they are now, and they're really afraid of getting back into a situation that is not going to be a good experience for them. It's going to bring out the worst in them. It's going to just be harder for them to be the best version of themselves than another work environment. Maybe that's the way of describing toxic or not toxic. Does it bring out the best in you or the worst in you? And they want to know, how do I spot some red flags before I commit to some new place?
Right, I don't want to get into this all over again. How do I avoid this ever happening again?
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. So I hear this all of the time from my clients. And so I think first and foremost, before we even talk about, how do you spot red flags? I think that there actually has to be a shift just in the fact that, like, we have to thank our misery. Like, we've all grown. The three of us are here tonight on this call and like best friends because we were miserable in a job.
Yep.
We get something from every experience, whether it was enjoyable or pleasurable or not. And so, I think, sorry, that just kind of popped up, Krista. I know that doesn't answer your question, but I think that, we have to look at everything as not necessarily a mistake or, oh, that was like the wrong choice. I should have went somewhere else, because if we allow ourselves to, we're going to learn something from every single experience.
Well, I like that answer because it takes some of the pressure off of you to feel like you have to pick the perfect place before you even get there. You can do all the research in the world. You can ask all the right questions, and it could seem like a really great fit. And even if it's not, once you get there, you are going to grow as a person.
Right. So
the next experience that you go to is going to be the right experience for some reason, even if it's not always the most pleasant experience.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a really big distinction, right? And like also knowing that, you might get into an organization and love it for a year or two, and then all of a sudden you're like, I think I evolved past it.
Yeah.
Right. And like, maybe that's true. Like, stop trying to make the square peg fit in the round hole. Like, sometimes we do evolve and grow, and that's okay too. So it goes both ways with judging, our decisions as right or wrong. Like, it's not actually true. You're going to get what you need from every single work experience that you have.
Yeah. Well, and you just actually went right into another question I wanted to ask, because you said
she didn't quite, hold on.
Oh,
yeah.
That's true. You gave
really
a partial answer.
Yeah, because people are still waiting on that answer of, but how do I tell if it's going to suck before I go into it?
So, I mean, here's my thing. And like, you guys can tell me, I'm an extrovert. So this is like my tried and true technique. I'd love to hear your perspective on it. So one, it's like we said earlier, like, you have to know what you want, right? So like, the thing that irks me the most with new clients, like, well, what do you want in a job? Well, I just want some place where I can be happy and I can use my gifts, and that could be doing A, B, C, E, D, like 26 different things. Like, no, what do you want? Like, just pick something, right? And again, it goes back to, who do you want to be? What are the skills? What are the qualities? What are the characteristics that you really want to use? Like, get really clear on that. And the reason that this is so important is because then the way you find your next job is by using your network. So it can literally be an email to your friends and family. Hey, I'm looking for a new position where I can do A and B, and the ideal type of work environment for me is X, Y, Z.
Yes.
Well, I think, yes, that's a perfect point, that the clearer you are on what you want and who you are, the easier it's going to be for you to understand what's going to naturally align with you and what's going to be a misalignment. If you are like a bowl of Jell-O, you can just mold to anything, you are in danger of molding to a toxic environment, because you'll just kind of be like, oh, sure, I guess I could fit in here. Or I don't know. I mean, it seems fine. Like, the more wishy-washy you are, the more you're in danger of just getting kind of swept up, I think.
Yes.
And I think people think they have to be wishy-washy because then there's more opportunities. Like, if I'm too specific, then I'll never find the right organization.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I'm also thinking that the good girl or good guy syndrome and the people pleaser comes out maybe hardest in interviewing.
Yeah.
And so I would say, in addition to being really honest and clear with your network, you have to be really honest and clear throughout the entire interview process. And if a particular type of working style or management style does not work for you, you need to tell them that.
Yeah, or you need to ask, what kind of management style do you guys really prefer here? Like, just ask the questions that you think are uncomfortable.
Yes. And the more honest you can be in that experience, the clearer it becomes whether this is a match or not, for you and for them. So if your goal is to get hired, that you're going to end up doing whatever you have to do to get hired. If your goal is to get hired by the right place, then you have to be as discerning as they are trying to be.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yes. Totally. Right. Like we forget, especially as people pleasers. I mean, I think people pleasers in a job search, it's like, I'll be anybody you want me to be. Just hire me. No, like we're totally going to be back in the spot. No, you have to be you. And, to your point, Kristen, and Rachel, like, yes, we have to, everybody that you meet on that interview, like you have to interview them, right? Just as much, like you're sizing them up just as much as they're sizing you up. And, for me, I like to do as much recon as I can, like before the formal interview. So like, this is where things like LinkedIn, right? Like using your network really works to your advantage. Like, who do you know that works in this company, right? Or who do they know that they can introduce you to?
Yeah.
Like buy that person a cup of coffee. Like, I want the real deal, right? Like, what's it like to work here? How do they value their employees? What does growth look like?
Yep.
Right?
Ask someone who has no stake in the game because they don't care whether you get the job or not. They're just going to be honest because why else do they care?
Right. Exactly. And, if you don't, if there's no one in your network that that works at the company, when you're on the interview, it's not just asking the right questions, but it's paying attention. So, when you are waiting for wherever you're waiting, right, for the interviewer to come get you, are people happy? Are people smiling? Is the office clean?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know it sounds so simple, but these are things that we are usually so nervous about the interview that we don't look for.
Right.
Because we're in our own brains.
Yeah.
When you hear people on the phone with customers, are they pleasant?
Yeah. I always tell my clients right after an interview, take 30 seconds to take stock of how you feel. Do a gut check.
Not like, oh, did I do badly? More no, how do you feel about
the situation? About the experience you just had? Just a quick gut check, because that's when it's going to be the most relevant.
Exactly.
Okay, we got one major last question for you. The one that I guess people are going to really want to know. When do I stay and when do I go?
Yeah. I mean, I said to Rachel, I'm like, there's no easy answer here.
Well, because it's such a personal question. There are no blanket answers in Clarity on Fire ever.
No.
Okay? So take this with a grain of salt. But like, I'm pretty sure we've got some good sort of pointers, right?
Yes, for sure. So, okay, when should you stay and when you should go? Okay, so let's first talk about when you should stay. So there's kind of two things that come up for me in this one. So one, and this is something that Rachel and I were talking about, is if you feel like the organization is the right fit, but the job is not, like that could be an indication that it might be worth having some conversations with the powers that be to get a new role within the organization.
Yeah.
Yep. You don't have to completely jump ship if you don't like your specific job duties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The second thing is that I think we tend to think about advancement only in terms of promotion. And at a lot of companies, there just isn't a next step, right? Like a formal next step or a new title to jump into. And so think about what are the skills? What are the qualities? What are the experiences that you want to grow into? And is your current employer willing to help you get those, right? And I've seen companies help my clients like get skills and experiences that have nothing to do with their job, but they just like them so much and wanted to keep them happy that they were willing to pay for it.
There you go. Again, I bet you there's people right now listening to this going, well, that's irrelevant to my job. No one would pay for that. They never asked.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to ask for those things.
Right.
That's right. The answer to every unasked question is no, right? So the thing is that if something you're interested in, like indirectly, it probably does tie to your job. And I'm pretty sure you can come up with a reason, like a really good reason as to how it's going to make you a better employee.
Yeah.
Right?
And you can span anything, I love, that's my jam right there.
Exactly. And it may not be that they're paying for it. Maybe it's that they're, maybe you want to go, I don't know, get a yoga certification and they're going to give you the time off of work to do so. Like who knows what it might look like. It might not just be that they're funding it. So kind of get creative with the ways that they can support you in it. And then the other thing that comes to mind, and Rachel, you and I were talking about this, is, misery loves company. And like when we work in a toxic or dysfunctional work environment, it's kind of like there's solidarity where it's almost like I'm going to dig my heels in and I'm going to hate this place. Even if the most amazing opportunity presented it to me, I'd say no, like just because.
Right. Because I won't be one of the cool kids, right? Like it's like we're all emo goths and we're like, no, I can't go see a Pixar movie that's like derivative, man. And it's like, no, but Pixar's really freaking cool. They make the best movies. It's like, like you can like things that are kind of lame and mainstream. And you're right. It can be kind of like part of the cool kid crowd to hate on it and to commiserate. And it can sometimes be like really hard to break away from the crowd and say, no, I'm going to try to make this better. And everyone's like, no, but like, that's our thing. We hate this together.
Right. And I hate it. So if I don't hate this place, what does that mean? Right. And so the client I was telling you about earlier, who's like now second in command, I mean, she literally at one session said to me, I think I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, does this mean I'm never going to leave? Like there's this fear that because now all of a sudden she was enjoying her job, she was agreeing with the dysfunction.
Well, okay. And part of this also, just like to plant a little seed, a lot of your parents, people listening to this, a lot of your parents and the people in your life have planted an unconscious belief that people don't like to work.
Right. So you're not supposed to like working.
Working is hard. People don't like it. You just do it. And so it's funny that even when people like it, they're thinking there's something wrong with them for liking it because they're going against this in this sort of unconscious belief that's been planted.
Or that they're going to be a victim to this, like, now I'm going to get stuck here because no, you still have a choice.
Right. No one's shackling you to the desk.
I like it so much, I'm stuck. Like, what?
It's like, I married this really hot man. I can't believe I'm stuck here. I'd be like, please.
But it's so true. I mean, and I know I'm guilty of that. Like, I totally thought that, like, oh my gosh, if I like this job, that must mean I'm giving up on like my bigger vision. No, like you can like your job and still know that there's something else in store for you.
And it can be a stepping stone to other things down the road.
Exactly.
Like liking your job is a good thing, people. Please don't like crap on that. There's enough people who hate their jobs. If you genuinely like it, then squeeze the most juice and life out of that you can. And then trust that when it's time to move on, you'll know it and you'll go.
Yep, exactly. Okay. Exactly. So those are some things that come to mind about like, why should you stay? Well, why should you go? I mean, I think, obviously if you're just in a place where you are so overwhelmed, you're so overworked, you're so overtired, you're so burnt out and you just need relief, right? And you're just like, I want to do all of these things. Like I'd love to get a grip on my gremlin and I would, really love to stop taking shit personally. But like right now I'm too tired.
I'm so burnt out and I just can't do another day. Yeah.
I know. If the thought of us saying, well, but you can change your circumstance and there's things you could ask for
and cry.
Then, right. If you're just too burnt out to even consider small things, small minor changes, then that might just mean you need a breath of fresh air.
You need is like to kind of wipe the slate clean, get a bridge job or something that doesn't require a ton of your mental, emotional energy and rebuild from there. And that's okay.
Yes. Did I ever tell you guys, this is like funny, but not. Did I ever tell you guys at the time that I manifested getting in a car accident so I didn't have to go to work?
I can't remember. Maybe.
I don't remember this.
I was on my way to work and I was so mad that I had to go to work. Like I just was in that place. I was burnt out. I was like the worst version of myself. And I literally thought, like what if like I just got like rear-ended? Like nothing major, just like something enough, like a good reason to not go in. And I'm not kidding you. 20 seconds later, I got rear-ended.
Oh, no.
That's a powerful manifesting.
Right? And not in a good way. But guess what? It was a wake-up call. That was the day I was like, I think something's got to change. Like, I would have rather put my life on the line to get rear-ended than go to work.
Kristen, that's like your client who wanted to fall and break their leg in the shower.
Yeah, she would visualize in the morning. If I broke, not like my spine or something, but just my leg, how many days off do you think I could
hard,
get?
Like a hairline fracture, not like a compound fracture or anything, but like a little one.
I know.
It's like if you're imagining bodily harm to get out of work, it's time to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, and this might seem obvious, but I feel like we should say it anyway because I'm thinking of a client who was in this situation, and you can get so caught up in the victim triangle that you're not even seeing things straight. But if you are in a situation where there is actually you don't feel safe, or there is actually verbal or God forbid, like physical
or just like emotionally abusive or manipulative behavior,
absolutely get out of there as soon as possible. That is not, you don't need to change that.
If your psychological health is really suffering or if your body's starting to give out, please, that's not worth it.
Physical health symptoms that are preventing you from showing up properly. I mean, definitely get out in those situations. Yeah. I know it's going to seem obvious to some of you, but some of you might need that wake-up call.
Well, because a lot of those things come on gradually, especially the physical manifestations of being really unhappy. A lot of the time, people won't draw the conclusion that it's all of the stress of this job that's causing me to break down. And sometimes they have to hit like a critical mass before they put two and two together. And I'm hoping that for some of you, maybe you're realizing now, oh my God, the reason I feel like garbage is because I've been tolerating this thing that I absolutely hate. And it's not worth my body breaking down for.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. I know we're like talking so much, but I feel like this is such a good conversation and so valuable that I don't really feel bad about it. I have I swear, it's one last question for you, which is that we spent almost this whole time talking about particularly what to do from an employee standpoint. Like if you resonate as more like the victim, but there are probably people who are listening to this who are leaders in some capacity. Like they have an employee or they have some direct reports. So do you have any words of wisdom for people in that position? Like, what do you do if you're in a toxic environment and you're a leader? But the people who are listening to this are the type who are open to changing something, which is good.
Yeah. So, it's actually really interesting because when you started saying, like, asking this question, at first I was like, okay, what would I say to a leader? And then I realized, actually this whole conversation is for leaders too, right?
Yeah.
Because I will tell you that most leaders, like, especially middle management, is a really hard place to be. And there's so much victim energy going on there.
Yeah.
Because they feel like they're playing tug of war and they're the rope. Like my people want this, my boss wants this. Like, I don't even know what I want, right? And I'm just trying to like keep myself together and not get ripped in two.
Yeah.
So everything we talked about today absolutely applies to leadership.
Yeah. And I would also say, as much as possible, if you can make a safe space for your people to give you real feedback.
Yeah. Allowing people to give you feedback is huge, right?
Then that can make a big difference if they're feeling a little bit timid.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so ask for the feedback, but then here's the caveat. You have to do something with their feedback.
Yeah. You can't just listen to it.
And you can't take it personally either.
Exactly.
You can't be on that ladder of inference.
Yes. And so my classic line when I'm, debriefing a leader, like on a 360 or something along those lines is, you have to accept that those are your people's opinions and that is their reality. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Because I think there's this like thing where like, well, I don't do that. And I don't, I'm not selfish or I'm not, too bold or whatever the feedback might be. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree, but you have to accept that's how they're experiencing you.
Yeah.
And is that how you want them to experience you?
Yeah.
Probably not if you're asking for feedback, right? So it's like, to your point, like, yes, the folks listening to this are totally open to change. And asking for their opinion is step one. But it's also then when they give their opinion, being really gracious about it. Like, don't get defensive, right?
Yeah.
And again, like, it sounds so simple until we're the one receiving the feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really vulnerable. I feel like I haven't even read Brene Brown's latest book about daring to lead, but I feel like, or Dare to Lead, I think it's called. I think that would be an amazing book for anyone who is in a leadership position. Anything Brene Brown, you can't go wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Stacy, we have to wrap it up, even though I don't want to. But this has
been fantastic.
Such a good conversation. And we're so grateful to you. Where can people, I don't actually know how you want to answer this question, so I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot, but how is it best for people to interact with you or to find you?
Well, the reason Rachel doesn't want to answer that question is because I'm like the weirdo that doesn't do anything on social media.
We do the bare minimum, so I can't say much.
Because you're not a hermit. You're a very extroverted person, but you're just not like a big, you're not like the best millennial there ever was in that regard.
Even this podcast, it was like stressing me out. Like, cause I'm like, it's technology. Like,
all she had to do was get on Skype, you guys. That's it.
I know. It's right. It sounds so easy. And yet you should have seen before the call. So how can people find me? So definitely my website, slccoaching.net.
Yeah, we'll link to that in the episode description.
Yep. Or I'm also on Voxer, which is this really fun app that allows you to send voice memos back and forth to one another. Kristen, I think you're on it.
Yep.
Or text messages. So I love, love, love being on Voxer, and it's just at Stacy Campesi.
And so people can like follow you there, and then you'll just like give pearls of wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. But just let me know. Send me a message if you follow me, just saying, hey, like sign me up.
Yeah. And I found you on Rachel and Kristen's podcast or something like that.
Yeah. Just use code word Rachel and I'll get it.
Don't think it's weird. Stacy would love to talk to you.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm just going to put a plug for if you're in the DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia area and you are in a business that you feel like could benefit from some like fly ass workshops or something like that. Or like, maybe you've got a little bit of a toxic situation and you think a little bit of good facilitating or some good assessments
objective third party.
Yeah, some workshopping would come in handy. I think Stacy is available to come into your workplace and to give some presentations and to kind of work on your team. Yes? Am I lying when I say this?
Yes. No, I love, love, love doing group work.
Yes.
And
She's
the thing
good
I
at it
love too
too.
is I know how to talk the talk. So I'm MBTI certified. I'm emotional intelligence, EQI certified. And so, yeah, bosses love all of those things.
She can do all of the assessments that corporate America loves. So if you're in our area and you want to pitch Stacy to your employer, then by all means, reach out to her on her website.
Or if you're somewhere warm and you want to pay for my travel, that's totally cool too.
Obviously, why am I even closing you down to opportunities? I want to open you up. Yes, please pay
Get out of the snow.
pay for Stacy's plane ticket, and maybe one of us will be her magician's assistant, and we'll just like
Yeah, please. That's
fly in her suitcase with her. Okay, this has been awesome. Thank you for this conversation. I can't wait to hear people's feedback. I think it's going to be really, really helpful. I wish I had had this when I was 7 years younger. I'm not sure I would have been brave enough to actually, I don't know.
I needed to hear it. Though.
I
That's
needed to
for
hear
sure.
it, but I'm not sure if, I don't know. I'm not sure I would have been brave enough to actually take you up on all of it, but that's okay. Because sometimes you got to grow into this type of work.
If you need to come back and listen again when you're feeling a little bit more solid, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll plant some seeds right now.
Yeah, no judgment. Okay, thanks, Stacy. We'll talk to you later.
Bye,
Thank
Stacy.
you. Bye.
Okay, so even if you yourself are not in a toxic work environment, I have a feeling that you know someone who is. So please share this with anyone in your life who feels stuck in their own toxic work environment and doesn't know what to do. This might be exactly the conversation that they need to hear. So
Yeah.
pass along the message.
Yeah, please. I mean, some people need some little bit of clarity on fire in their life.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, just as a reminder, remember, we have a YouTube channel now. So if you want to listen to our podcast there, you can totally do that. And remember, we're not going to be doing videos for every single one. That will be monthly when we do side chats. So we'll remind you of that. But for those of you who have friends or family or colleagues or whatever who aren't big podcast people, but for some reason they like videos or they like YouTube videos, tell them to go over there and subscribe to Clarity on Fire YouTube channel.
Yeah, please subscribe. We just started this channel, so
probably have,
don't
like, 2
have any
subscribers right now.
subscribers, so we would really appreciate
One is probably me. It's fine. I don't really care. We're just doing this as a supplement to, our
But
podcast. Hey, but I really like the idea of ad revenue. So help us get those sweet, sweet dollar bills, y'all.
Right. You have to have a certain number of subscribers, I think. So help us out.
Yeah. Okay. So we will see you on Tuesday
with a repeat blog from you.
I don't like saying repeat because it seems like I'm
Well,
being...
more like a throwback because you won't remember it. It's not a repeat that's recent enough that any of you will remember it.
Right. And if you do, then you'll just get something different out of it than you did last time. That's
Yep.
my take. So, all right. We'll see you then.
See you then.